You ever care so much it hurts? I'm talking about that kind of care that keeps you up at night, overthinking conversations, checking your phone every 5 minutes, bending over backward, trying to be enough, and still, it never feels like it is. And the wild part, you think that caring this deeply makes you strong, but it doesn't. It actually makes you fragile. Not because caring is wrong, but because you've been giving that care to the wrong people, the wrong places, the wrong things. Let's talk about it. Because when your peace depends on whether they text you back, whether they validate you, whether the situation turns out exactly how you hoped, then anyone at any moment can shake your entire foundation without even trying. And that's not peace. That's not strength. That's survival mode with a smile. We've been tricked into believing that being a good person means being endlessly available, endlessly understanding, endlessly forgiving. But let me tell you something. Real sometimes, what's breaking you isn't the world being cruel. It's you caring about people who wouldn't flinch if you disappeared tomorrow. It's heavy, I know. But this isn't about bitterness. This is about clarity. Let's flip the script. What if I told you that the very thing you think makes you kind, your endless giving, your constant emotional labor, your need to fix everything, might actually be a quiet form of self-abandonment, wrapped up to look like love? Because here's the shift. The moment you stop caring about things that don't care, back not out of spite, but from calm, grounded self-awareness, something inside you clicks. You stop chasing. You stop spinning. You stop giving your entire soul away just to be tolerated. And that's when you become unbreakable. Not numb, not cold, just whole. Let me tell you a story someone I know went through this shift. She was the kind of person who overexplained everything. She'd reread texts a dozen times, questioning her tone, her timing, her worth. She gave and gave and gave. Friends, family, lovers didn't matter. If they needed something, she was there. Even when it wrecked her, and the whole time she thought it made her good, valuable, lovable. But behind that need to always be, there was something quieter, something deeper, a fear that if she stopped being so available, so accommodating, she'd disappear. And one day she did. Not to the world, but to herself. Not in some big meltdown moment. Not a dramatic scene. It was quiet. She just stopped. Stopped reaching out. Stopped chasing answers. Stopped trying to convince people to treat her better. Stopped performing. And she told me that silence terrifying at first. Like standing in a room that suddenly lost all its sound. But in that silence, something new started to bloom. She began to realize how much of her life had been spent pouring into black holes. How many of her connections were actually transactions. How many of her conversations were really just monologues where she never truly got heard. And she started to breathe again. For the first time in years, she wasn't obsessed with who was texting back. She wasn't rehearsing conversations in her head. She wasn't shape-shifting into someone more palatable just to stay loved. She was just there. And little by little, her energy started returning to her. The energy she used to spend holding it all together went back into her own healing, her own rest, her own joy. She said something I'll never forget. I didn't become cold. I just became unavailable to the bullshit. That hit me because she didn't build walls, she built standards. She didn't start ghosting people, she stopped overextending herself. She didn't stop caring, she started caring smarter. And from that shift, she became free. free from guilt-tripping text messages, free from arguments meant to bait her back in, free from being the fixer in every broken story. Peaceful, not fake peaceful, earned peaceful. And that kind of peace, that's the real glow-up. That's the kind of peace that makes people confused, uncomfortable even. Because you're not reacting the same way. You're not folding the same way. You're not playing the role anymore. You're just being, and some people, they won't know what to do with that. They'll test you. They'll disappear and come back just to see if the door's still open. They'll call you changed, like that's a bad thing. But the truth is, you did change. You had to. You stopped making yourself available to people who only remembered you when it was convenient. You stopped explaining your heart to people committed to misunderstanding you. You stopped chasing clarity from people who only ever gave confusion. And now you don't owe anyone a reaction. You don't owe anyone an explanation. You don't owe anyone your energy just because they showed up late with a half-hearted apology. Because your worth is no longer on the clearance rack. You've upgraded your soul, and not everyone gets access to it anymore. And you know what the wildest part is? You don't even miss the old you, the version of you who cared so much it left you empty. The version who confused attachment for love. The version who gave more than she ever received. That version gone. And what replaced it? Stillness, clarity, wholeness. She told me something else too, something small but massive, that in the beginning it felt weird. Like her nervous system didn't know what to do with the quiet. No fires to put out, no energy to chase, no crises to decode. It was just her alone with herself, and that was the most unfamiliar part. Because when you've spent years managing everyone else's emotions, silence feels threatening. When you've measured your value by how useful you are, stillness feels like failure. But that's just the detox. That's the withdrawal from emotional chaos. And once you make it through that fog, once you resist the urge to fix, to chase, to perform something, opens up space, mental space, emotional space, soul space. For the first time, you start having actual conversations with yourself again. Not the anxious kind, where you spiral over what someone said or didn't say, but the honest kind, like, what do I even want? What do I actually need? What am I carrying that was never mine? And that's where healing begins. Not in some loud revelation, not in a big spiritual ceremony, just in those quiet, consistent choices to come home to yourself. Day by day, your energy becomes your own again. You stop asking for permission to feel what you feel. You stop shrinking so others feel more comfortable. You stop negotiating your truth like it's up for debate. And then one day, without warning, you realize you've stopped performing entirely. You're no longer drafting texts 10 times to get the tone just right. You're no longer trying to be agreeable just to be liked. You're no longer chasing connections that only exist when you do the work. You just show up, and what happens next? People start to notice. Not always in good ways, not always in loving ways. Because change doesn't just transform you, it disrupts the pattern. When you stop over-caring, over-explaining, over-giving, it rattles people who depended on that version of you. They say you've changed. They say you're distant now. They say you're not the same. But what they're really saying is, you stopped making your life about my comfort. And that's okay, because your life was never meant to be a soft landing for other people's disregard. You weren't born to be emotionally convenient. You weren't meant to prove your worth by breaking yourself into smaller pieces just so others could feel whole. And now you don't. Now you stand whole, even if it makes others uncomfortable. Now you set boundaries and you keep them. Now you say no and you don't explain it away. Now you recognize manipulation and you don't dance with it. Because you've learned that not everyone deserves access to your energy. Not everyone gets to meet the healed you. Not everyone gets to sit at your table just because they once knew the version of you who didn't have one. And that's not rude. That's self-respect. You've stopped negotiating your boundaries like they're suggestions. You've stopped letting guilt talk you into situations that drain you. You've stopped thinking that your silence is more loving than your truth. And in return, life starts to align differently. You notice peace in places where there used to be anxiety. You notice clarity in situations that once felt confusing. You notice your nervous system doesn't jump anymore when someone pulls away, because you've stopped tying your identity to people's ability to stay. You've stopped assigning your value to their approval. You've stopped outsourcing your sense of self to people who don't even know who they are. And the most magical part, you realize you don't miss the old chase. You don't miss the performance. You don't miss bending until you disappear. That old version of you, the over-caring, overthinking, overly available one, wasn't sustainable. She was surviving, not thriving. She was doing her best with what she had. But now you have more. Now you are more, and you carry yourself differently, not with arrogance, with clarity. You know who you are. You know what you offer. You know what you won't accept anymore. So when someone walks away, now you don't beg. When someone ghosts, you don't spiral. When something doesn't feel aligned, you walk. No explanation, no apology. Just a quiet decision to protect your energy because you finally know it's sacred. You're not fragile anymore. You're focused. You're not bitter. You're boundaried. You're not cold. You're clear. And it's in that clarity, that peaceful, centered clarity, that something profound starts to happen. You stop needing everything to make sense. You stop obsessing over closure, over responses, over validation. You stop waiting for people to realize your worth because you already did. And in that space where your worth is no longer a question, you move differently. You attract differently. Not because you're playing games or using tactics, but because your energy says, I'm not for chaos anymore. That kind of energy is unmistakable. It's calm. It's grounded. It's real. And sure, not everyone will love it. Some people will try to test you, to trigger the old you, to push your buttons and see if you'll still react. But you don't. Not because you're above them, but because you've outgrown the game. You don't chase confusion. You don't beg for consistency. You don't over-explain your boundaries to people who aren't listening. You're done bending backwards just to keep things from breaking. Because if something breaks just because you stopped overextending, it was never stable to begin with. And now you see that clearly. You no longer need to be liked by everyone, especially if it costs you your peace. You no longer need to be understood by everyone, especially if it requires shrinking your truth. And here's the truth. Not everyone gets the healed version of you. Not because you're punishing them, but because not everyone knows how to handle someone who's no longer willing to abandon themselves for connection. You're not here to be everyone's safe space. You're not here to carry wounds that aren't yours. You're not here to be the emotional sponge for people who refuse to heal. You're here to be whole, to breathe, to exist fully as you are. And in that fullness, you no longer feel guilty for saying no. You no longer feel the need to explain your silence. You no longer wait for the world to give you permission to rest. You take it, you claim it, you own it, because that is your right to be whole, to be free, to be rooted in your own power, without needing to convince anyone else that you deserve it. And yeah, some people might call you selfish. They might say you've changed. They might miss the version of you who made life easier for them at your own expense. But you won't go back, because you remember what that cost you. You remember what it felt like to constantly question your worth, to measure your value by how well you could fix things, to perform emotional labor just to feel like you mattered. You're done with that. You're done being breakable, done being available for everything and everyone but yourself. Now your presence is intentional. Your energy is sacred. Your time is respected by you first. You've stopped chasing love, peace, and worthiness because you finally remembered it was never out there. It was always in you. And once you touch that truth, even just once, you can never unfeel it. You begin to move slower, speak softer, but with more weight. Say less, but mean more. You don't argue to be heard anymore. You don't explain yourself into exhaustion. You don't water yourself down to be digestible. You just be, and that being, that quiet confidence, it's magnetic. It's healing, not only for you, but for the people who are meant to walk beside you. Because now you attract people who don't need you to overgive to be loved. You draw in those who honor your peace, not test it. You welcome those who recognize your value, not just when they need something. And slowly you build a new circle. One that doesn't revolve around your ability to perform, but around your ability to just exist in all your truth, depth, and softness. That's the real shift. Not becoming harder, not becoming colder, but becoming truer, clearer, stronger. Because now your strength is rooted in something internal, not external. And so here's your choice now that you've seen all this. You can keep overthinking, overextending, and overcaring just to feel needed. Or you can let that version of you finally rest. Not with a quote, not with a temporary boundary, but with a quiet decision that you're not abandoning yourself anymore. That your peace is not up for sacrifice. That your worth isn't on the table. You've tried the other way. You've bent. You've broken. You've chased. Now try this. Try stillness. Try boundaries. Try wholeness. Try peace. And if something in this spoke to you, if it echoed something you've been feeling but couldn't quite say, then take this moment to name it. Say it out loud. Write it in the comments. I'm done breaking just to belong. Because this is your turning point. This is your moment of alignment. You're not building a louder life. You're building a stronger one. And that's everything. And if this hits something in you, if something shifted even a little, go to the comments and drop this "I don't break." Say it, type it, let it sit. That comment isn't for the algorithm. It's for you. It's a moment of truth, a decision in real time, a line drawn gently but firmly. And if this is where you are now, if you're choosing peace over performance, clarity over chaos, then hit that like button, subscribe. Because this space right here, it's for the ones who are done breaking just to belong. We're not building louder lives. We're building stronger ones. I'll see you in the next one.